Hi everyone, I'm YvonneOsei, a Guinean multidisciplinary artist, conceptual designer, and art educator. Such crazy times, I tell you. We're living in a medical pandemic, we're also living in a racial pandemic. I hope you all are doing okay. I'm great. I am in the Philadelphia area. I'm sheltering in place here with my husband, and if I'm not in Philly, I actually have a studio space in St. Louis. And so I move between Philadelphia and St. Louis. But I would say that I'm a bona fide St. Louisan. I've lived in St. Louis for about 10 years. Prior to that, I was living in Ghana. I'm a Guinean national. And I've been living in St. Louis for over 10 years now. But my practice extends the United States in so many respects. Although I have a physical studio, most of my work is actually done outside of the studio. So I love to interact with public space. I get inspiration from passers-by, the conversations that I hold with them, from travel, experiencing different landscapes and seeing things that are unfamiliar and asking, what are these unfamiliar things that I'm seeing? And then I bring that experience back into my studio in the form of installations, in the form of video art, photography, sculpture, and things like that. So I'm really inspired by public space. I would say I do a 30-70, 30 being in my studio and 70% being outside of my studio. So I get a lot of fulfillment when I am operating in public space. Also, everything that I do is filtered through a global consciousness. Over the years, I have nurtured this intercontinental practice that addresses issues relating to race, identity, the standards of beauty, colonialism, and the limitations of history through questioning the world that we live in. And so I dwell a lot on questioning and why things are the way they are, and why certain things are placed the way they're placed, or not even mentioned in our understanding of the world that we live in. And I'll be talking a lot more about that. Today, I will take you through my art practice and a bit of my creative research to hopefully bring some insights about how the importance of asking critical questions can help expand your respective practices. I decided to focus on art and the audacity to question because I strongly believe in the power of cultivating boldness to ask questions, and how seeing seeing things differently or asking different questions is necessary. It's actually a necessary act in bringing your viewpoints forward and bringing your voice to the world. As an artist, I believe that we are positioned in a strategic way to present viewpoints that have been maybe not considered or erased or muffled over the years. Right? And so I do this in my own practice. I'm constantly questioning, things that are seen as commonplace, questioning if things can be seen differently, or if things can be more inclusive. I'm constantly questioning. And so today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about, I would say about 3 bodies of work that uses questioning as a way to think about the way I structure my work and the way I expand my practice. And I'm hoping that by doing that, by unraveling these bodies of work, that you would also have a bit of understanding for your own practice on how to use questions to broaden some of the territories that you're already delving in. The first body of work that I want to talk about is Africa Clothed Me Bare. I actually started this work in 2015, and it's basically wrapping and unwrapping nude female sculptures in public spaces. And so what I have been doing over the years is clothing and unclothing them using different decorative fabrics. Some fabrics that I've bought in fabric shops here in the US and back home in Ghana. This body of work actually started in Geneva, where I was visiting for a couple of days in 2015, and I moved into this space that had this bronze sculpture. And the bronze sculpture was called Jeanette, and Jeanette was a young female that I felt was so frail for the space that she was positioned in. I had this duffel bag that I often travel with, and I was carrying these decorative textiles that I had purchased from a shop in the United States that said that they were African textiles, but I was questioning their authenticity at that time, at least to me, and basically what they were doing on the market. And so I usually would carry items that I'm still thinking about and still questioning with me on my travel. So I had that, and then I had a backpack that had my camera and then my video camcorder. And I stacked my backpack on my duffel bag and then my camera on my backpack, and almost instantaneously I started to clothe Jeanette with one of these decorative textiles that I was carrying. And so after a couple of hours I started to unclothe her again. And so it was this sort of intuitive or almost spontaneous way of responding to what I had seen, and responding to the questions that I was asking myself of her presence in that space. This work, of course, grew from Jeanette to others, clothing other sculptures around Europe, but also in the United States. Like I said, it's an ongoing body of work. And I think for me, what I'm questioning with this work is what we legitimize as nude and what we legitimize as naked. Which bodies are seen as naked and which bodies are seen as nude. And what the fragility between nakedness and nudity. Whereas nudity is this legitimized form of nakedness, or this aestheticized form of nakedness, right? And the fine line between how we identify nudity and nakedness. And just questioning that which bodies were seen as nude in a certain time and which bodies weren't, right? And what it means for me as a black female to clothe this Caucasian featured nude sculpture and other ones that I have clothed in marble and in stone and whatnot. What is my presence doing in this act of clothing and unclothing? You know, because a lot of times the narrative is that the Caucasian is given back to the black community or the black person. But in this instance, through my presence and through my act of rapping, the Caucasian female is liberated. I think it's important to note some of the questions I was asking. Who created Jeanette and what was she created for? It's something that I have come to kind of research and think about. Jeanette was actually created by a French male artist at a time when females, I think even with when she was created to commemorate a building that just 7 years prior to that, females were not even allowed to vote. So I was really interested in who has the authorship of a woman's body, and how we have come to live with the things that we've come to live with. Speaking about monuments and memorials are huge today, just with all the things that have been going around with monuments and how we are thinking about collective memory, collective remembrance. And I think that these sculptures, these public sculptures that we live with is something that I've been questioning since 2015, and asking myself why they exist and what it is that it is. But it's important to also mention that I am reversing this idea of the colonial narrative. Now you have me as a black subject given back to a white, not an object, but an object that's been transformed into a subject. So it's that sisterhood just through the act of clothing and unclothing that I'm portraying here. But it's always delightful to work in public space because it triggers so many responses. I've had interactions from children all the way to adults, and the pleasure of just seeing how people interact with the sculptures when they're clothed and unclothed. And some of the interactions that I've had with passers-by are memories that will live with me for a long time, right? Memories that some of them cannot be captured. So my works kind of exist in those stages and in those spaces, right, where you have in the public space where the work is being activated and then recorded, brought back into a museum or gallery space for this sort of secondary viewing. I've also been interested in just this idea of race, and understanding race is something that is really at the core of my practice. Some of the themes that I visit from time to time, and this body of work that I'm going to talk about, From Utopia with Love, came about when I was thinking, if our complexion was interchangeable, then what becomes of race? That was the question I was asking myself, that if there was a way that I could create an art that addresses ways that our complexion or our skins can be interchangeable, then really race becomes, something that is maybe that might not matter as much. And then I started thinking of clothing. That clothing is such that it's interchangeable, right? And so I created this body of work that I use photographs of different skin tones and different body parts. So body parts that I actually photograph to create textiles that would be then made into garments for different bodies. And this is something that is ongoing, something that I've been doing, where I've created a database of different skin tones that I photographed, and I've collected these over the years, and I pull from these photographs to design textiles that is then used as garment for people to wear. And it's really from this idea of making skins and body features interchangeable in a way to celebrate our diversity, but also to question the superficiality of race and colorism. So From Utopia with Love, I designed over 30 textiles and garments. One of the works which you're seeing now is a dress that I made from Caucasian skin. Here I'm actually wearing this photographic rendition of the Caucasian skin. Clothing itself is a membrane and it's its own skin. And so having those photo renditions of people's skin on that skin in a way emphasizes the tautology of skin, if you may, and then it then being put on our skin almost as another protective layer. These are all ideas that I've been thinking about. The work also presents this idea of a human body carrying another person's body parts through photographs that have been transformed into textile design. And so I'm really fascinated about how textiles can now start to create this dialogue between a body and another. An example is in Ghana, there's if you have a gap in your teeth, I share that feature. It's seen as a symbol of beauty. And so I took a picture of this African woman, and I transformed her, the picture of her smile, her teeth, into a necklace that featured that sort of gap teeth. And I had an African American woman wear that, right? So this sort of layering of different body parts and different body features that are different, right? Or people that are different coming together through textiles or through clothing that they're wearing. I'm really fascinated with the language of textile design. As you can see here in the background is one of the textiles that I have designed in a recent collection that is really looking at St. Louis specifically. I will not go too much in that, but this idea of textiles and the clothes that we wear as a medium for art making. These are all ideas that I've been thinking about in my own work, and ways that I can push the language of clothing a little bit more than it being just blocks of color and decorative wear. That clothing can have a level of criticality. I'm also fascinated with it just because of the way that it kind of dances between something that's so private to us and something that's public, right? When I put on a clothing, I put it on in closed doors. It's attached to my body. It's just so, me private. I, in a way, curate what I wear and or how I want to look like. But once I get out of my home, there's no telling how people are interpreting what I'm wearing. So there's that communal aspect of clothing as well that I enjoy. And so what I'm hoping for the textiles or the clothes or the garments that I have designed to do is to actually go out and cause people to rethink identity, to rethink race, and in a way to also talk about the commodification of complexions, right? And how history has commodified the black skin over and over again, and just really addressing issues around that. Now, this last body of work that I'm going to talk about is a rather recent body of work, which is also ongoing, and it's a series of works titled "Who Discovers the Discoverer," and in its sense, a question in many respects. And I think that anytime I think of someone discovering a people or a person, I think about it in a bit of absurdity, because it's interesting to think of you discovering someone, but in actuality the person could have also been discovering you at the same time, and so whose version is then told. And some of the things that I'm really interested in or fascinated about is history, and how history is told, how history is written, and who's controlling history, because it's the person that writes history, right, that actually controls the narrative. And so this series really focuses on history. Well, I'll talk about this one body of work, which is Esto a Procure de Diego de Azambuja. Yes, you're not listening to English. I just spoke a little bit of Portuguese, and which translates, I am looking for Diego de Azambuja. Who Discovers the Discoverer is really looking at my own history as a Guinean female who went through the Guinean school system, and in a way revisited or relived my experience in middle school, growing up in Ghana, and taking classes on history and social studies, and being taught a lot of colonial history. A lot of the history that we were taught in school started from colonial era, right? And so very little from pre-colonialism, just to show the impact of colonialism and how it even altered our way of learning. And for me, that body of work is about liberating the Guinean or the West African psyche in many respects, and liberating my own psyche and finding out truths for myself. Right? And so, Esto de Apacure de Diego Diaz Zambuja, which I said translates, I am looking for Diego Diaz Zambuja, is another body of work within this Who Discovers the Discoverers series, where I leave Ghana and visit Portugal. The reason why I visited Portugal is that Diego Diaz Zambuja is a man that is given credit for being the first European to have stepped foot in Ghana in 1471. He is also responsible for building one of the largest slave forts in Ghana, which was instrumental in the transatlantic slave trade. So the thing is, I learned a lot of dates as to, when the Portuguese arrived in Ghana, when the Dutch arrived, when the Danes arrived. These were things that we were tested on. These were things that, impacted us so much. So I decided to, leave that classroom experience and go to Portugal to see if the history that we held so dearly had that much weight in Lisbon, in Portugal. And so for 5 days, I wore my school uniform in my adult life and went around the city of Lisbon with a megaphone announcing to the people there that I am looking for Diego Diaz Zambuja over and over again in Portuguese. In a way, it was a search for knowledge, in a way, a questioning of people to see if they knew anything about a history that I had been taught, that I had inherited, that was a burden, on my psyche. And to my amazement, no one knew who Diego Diaz Zambuja was, right? A lot of people thought that it was some kind of a street or that I was looking for a loved one or something like that. And I think that it was that realization that I had there that made me understand that we magnify certain aspects, right, of history, and just basically how made up history itself is. And so taking control of my own narrative and knowing that for myself is a way very liberating, coming to Lisbon and seeing that even the history that we hold dear, weighs really no relevance to the people that lived there, was something that was telling for me. I'm just going to leave you with this, right? So one of the most liberating things that I came to find out is that my voice is valid, right? That the validation that I was seeking really doesn't come from a person. It doesn't come from your professors. It doesn't come from the degree that you're hopefully going to be earning soon. It doesn't come from a group of critics. It doesn't come from curators or museums and so on, right? It comes from you. You take charge of your validation. Your voice is valid and it's something that you need to believe in and know that it is, right? And act on that. Challenging the status quo, especially when it excludes your point of view or your personhood, is super important. And that's why I believe in garnering the boldness to ask the questions that need to be asked, right? And this idea of having the audacity to question through your work, saying what needs to be said, through the works that you create, and being unapologetic about it. Realizing that history was made by people like you and me, and being open to really being open-minded about other people's viewpoints, and ensuring that your story and the story of others are being honored and are being told, and that representation is taking course. And so without further ado, I just want to thank Meredith Lehman for the opportunity to speak to you all today, and Bethel College for extending the invitation and for providing this platform. Just be safe out there, and please continue to mask up. Thank you.